Matt Armstrong's Bugatti Veyron was supposed to be one of the biggest comeback stories on YouTube. After weeks of repairs, endless troubleshooting, and countless expensive parts, the car was finally moving under its own power again. But the moment Matt drove it, the Bugatti revealed a whole new level of problems hiding underneath the surface. What looked like a successful rebuild quickly turned into another disaster. The Veyron had already arrived with serious issues. The gearbox was dead, the engine was misfiring, coolant was leaking, and warning lights were appearing everywhere. Most people would have given up on a car like this because fixing a Bugatti Veyron is not like fixing a normal car. Every part is expensive. Every repair takes hours of work, and even basic maintenance can cost more than an entire family car. But Matt Armstrong wanted to prove that this hypercar could be saved. At first, things looked hopeful. After working through several mechanical issues, the gearbox finally started responding correctly. The car could select gears, build hydraulic pressure, and behave normally during testing. For the first time since arriving at the workshop, the Veyron actually seemed close to being roadworthy again. But Matt quickly realized the real danger was not the obvious damage everyone could see. The deeper he investigated, the more hidden problems appeared. Every repair uncovered another fault buried somewhere else inside the car. That constant feeling of discovering worse damage made the entire project feel more like solving a mystery than repairing a vehicle. Even experienced mechanics in the workshop looked shocked by some of the failures they discovered. What made the situation even crazier was the fact that this was not just any car. This was a Bugatti Veyron, one of the most famous hypercars ever built. People expect perfection from a machine worth well over $1 million. Instead, Matt was finding burnt wiring, failing electronics, leaking cooling systems, and components that looked completely worn out from years of neglect. The project slowly turned into a lesson about how unbelievably complex and fragile these ultra-expensive cars can become when they are not maintained properly. And just when it looked like the Veyron might finally be fixed, the gearbox nearly destroyed itself during its very first drive. The gearbox investigation became one of the most important parts of the entire rebuild. Matt brought in Ricky from RE Performance to help remotely diagnose the hydraulic pressure system inside the Veyron. Unlike normal cars, the Bugatti uses a very advanced hydraulic setup to operate its gearbox. A special pump builds pressure and stores it inside accumulators. That pressure is then used to shift gears quickly and smoothly. Ricky explained that a healthy system should build around 50 bar pressure and then hold it for about 2 minutes before the pump needs to reactivate. Matt followed the testing process carefully, cycling through the gears and monitoring the readings. Surprisingly, the results looked good at first. The pressure held longer than expected, which suggested the accumulators and gearbox itself were actually healthy. For a moment, it looked like the transmission nightmare might finally be over. But there was still one huge unanswered question. Earlier in the project, a fuse connected to the gearbox system had completely melted. Fuses only melt when too much electrical current passes through them for too long. That meant something inside the system had overheated badly at some point. Even though the gearbox appeared healthy during testing, the original cause of the failure was still hidden somewhere in the car. This created a strange situation where everything looked normal on paper, but nobody fully trusted the system anymore. The deeper Matt looked into the Veyron, the more it became clear that this car had likely gone years without proper servicing. Components were worn out, fluids looked contaminated, and electrical systems showed signs of heat damage. Instead of solving one clear problem, Matt was chasing a chain of connected issues affecting multiple systems at the same time. The gearbox itself was not the only concern either. While testing continued, the engine misfire problems started getting worse. Diagnostic scans pointed towards cylinder 16 on the left side of the massive W16 engine. Matt tried swapping coil packs between cylinders to see if the fault would move, which is a common way to test ignition problems. But the misfire stayed exactly where it was. Then things became even stranger. Instead of affecting one cylinder, misfires suddenly spread across almost the entire left bank of the engine. That completely changed the direction of the investigation. The engine inside the Bugatti Veyron is one of the most complicated road car engines ever built. It uses 16 cylinders arranged in a W16 layout, essentially combining two V8 engines together into one massive power unit. Each side of the engine has its own ion control module responsible for monitoring combustion and controlling the ignition system. When misfires began spreading across the entire left bank, attention quickly shifted toward those modules. The pattern of fault strongly suggested one side of the ignition control system was failing. Matt removed the modules and swapped them between banks to see whether the fault would follow. This type of testing helps mechanics identify whether a module itself is damaged or whether another issue exists somewhere else in the wiring or sensors. Surprisingly, after swapping the modules and clearing the fault codes, the engine suddenly started running properly again. The warning lights disappeared and the misfires stopped. But nobody in the workshop believed the problem was truly fixed. The behavior seemed inconsistent and temperature sensitive. The engine would misfire badly during cold starts and then behave more normally once warmed up. That made the issue even more frustrating because it was difficult to reproduce consistently. The strange behavior created constant uncertainty. At any moment, the engine could begin misfiring again without warning. Reaching those ignition components was also incredibly difficult. Accessing the coil packs required removing major sections of the car, including the quarter panel, coolant pipes, air filter housing, and structural supports. Simple maintenance tasks on a Veyron can turn into massive jobs requiring hours of labor. This is one reason Bugatti servicing costs are so high. Even replacing spark plugs on this car involves significant disassembly. The more Matt worked on the Veyron, the more people watching began to understand why ownership of these hypercars is so expensive. Every small repair requires specialized knowledge, patience, and huge amounts of time. Then the investigation uncovered one of the most shocking discoveries of the entire project. While examining the gearbox pump wiring, Matt found insulation that looked completely destroyed by extreme heat. The wires had become brittle, hard, and cracked open, exposing the metal conductor underneath. Mechanics in the workshop said they had never seen wiring damage that badly on a car before. The discovery immediately explained why the fuse had melted earlier in the rebuild. The gearbox pump had overheated so badly that it literally cooked its own wiring from the inside. The burnt gearbox pump wiring changed the entire understanding of what was happening inside the Bugatti. Until that moment, the failure seemed random and disconnected. But now it became clear that the gearbox pump had likely been overheating for a long time. The extreme heat slowly damaged the wiring insulation until the electrical system could no longer handle the load. Eventually, the fuse failed in an attempt to protect the rest of the car. What shocked everyone even more was discovering where the pump actually came from. The hydraulic pump used inside the Bugatti Veyron was reportedly the same type of pump used to operate the soft top roof mechanism on an Audi A5 convertible. That revelation stunned viewers because people expect $1 million hypercar to use completely unique high-performance components. Instead, one of the Veyron's most important systems relied on a relatively ordinary Volkswagen Group part. The problem was not necessarily the pump itself, but how hard it was being used inside the Bugatti. On the Audi, the pump only operates occasionally when the roof opens or closes. Inside the Veyron, however, the pump works constantly. It activates when the doors open, when the gearbox needs pressure, and whenever the transmission system demands hydraulic assistance. That heavy workload creates far more heat and stress than the component was likely designed for. Matt and his team realized the pump had probably been running continuously due to another hidden electrical fault somewhere in the system. That constant operation generated enough heat to destroy the wiring over time. A replacement pump was ordered, but the bigger problem still remained unsolved. Nobody knew what was causing the pump to stay active for so long in the first place. While dealing with the gearbox issues, another problem demanded attention. Since arriving at the workshop, the Bugatti had been leaking coolant onto the floor. Finding the source of the leak turned into another massive job. Reaching the front radiator required removing the bonnet, headlights, front bumper, wipers, and both front wings. Even after all those parts were removed, the radiator remained buried behind cooling fans, carbon fiber panels, and structural supports attached directly to the chassis. Fully removing the radiator would require dismantling suspension and steering components as well. Eventually, a smoke test revealed a tiny pinhole leak likely caused by a stone hitting the radiator at high speed. Rather than completely dismantling the front of the car, Matt used a radiator sealant designed to circulate through the cooling system and harden inside small leaks. Thankfully, the leak stopped once the engine reached operating temperature. After weeks of repairs, testing, and troubleshooting, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally arrived. Matt Armstrong was ready to drive the Bugatti Veyron for the first time since the rebuild began. The atmosphere in the workshop completely changed because this was no longer just another repair test. This was proof that the impossible project might actually succeed. Matt climbed into the driver's seat, started the W16 engine, and selected reverse gear. Instantly, the gearbox responded smoothly. Then he selected drive, and once again the transmission behaved perfectly. For the first time in a very long time, the Bugatti moved forward under its own power. Even at low speed, the car felt unbelievably powerful. Matt described the acceleration as effortless, with massive torque available almost instantly. The sound of the engine echoed to the workshop area like a jet aircraft passing nearby, drawing people outside just to watch the Veyron move again. For a brief moment, it seemed like all the stress, frustration, and expensive repairs had finally paid off. But the celebration lasted only seconds. Suddenly, warning lights exploded across the dashboard. Transmission warnings appeared, the engine light illuminated, and something alarming began happening behind the seats. The gearbox pump would not stop running. Instead of switching off after building enough pressure, it continued operating nonstop. Pressure readings climbed dangerously high, moving far beyond normal operating levels. Matt immediately realized the pump was about to destroy itself. If the pressure continued climbing, serious damage could occur again. The only option was to pull the fuse and disconnect the system before something catastrophic happened. Once the fuse was removed, the pressure finally dropped and the car returned to normal behavior. The terrifying part was how suddenly the problem appeared and disappeared. One moment the Veyron seemed perfectly healthy, and the next moment the gearbox system was on the verge of another major failure. Then, after resetting everything, the car behaved as though nothing had happened at all. This made diagnosis extremely difficult because the fault was inconsistent. Matt believed a relay, pressure sensor, or hidden electrical issue was likely commanding the pump to keep running when it should have shut off. But without a clear fault code, tracking the exact cause would take even more investigation. The drive that was supposed to celebrate success instead proved the Veyron still had serious hidden problems waiting to surface. Once the excitement of the first drive faded, Matt decided the only logical next step was a complete service of the entire car. The condition of the fluids and components suggested the Bugatti had likely gone far too long without proper maintenance. If old contaminated fluids were contributing to the electrical and mechanical problems, accurate diagnosis would be nearly impossible until everything was replaced. The service process itself revealed even more signs of neglect. All 16 spark plugs were removed from the engine, and every single one looked heavily carboned up and overdue for replacement. Surprisingly, the spark plugs themselves were ordinary NGK units shared with other Volkswagen Audi Group vehicles. This showed again that some parts inside the Veyron are less exotic than people expect. Still, reaching those components required massive amounts of labor because of how tightly packaged the engine bay is. The gearbox oil actually looked fairly clean, suggesting that someone may have serviced the transmission separately at some point in the car's history. But the engine oil told a completely different story. The W16 engine uses 16 separate drain points underneath the car. When the plugs were removed, dark contaminated oil poured out, looking badly degraded and overheated. The oil filter looked even worse, discolored and damaged from prolonged heat exposure. Watching that old oil drain from such an expensive engine shocked many viewers because it suggested the car had been neglected despite its enormous value. Matt realized the engine may have been running with poor lubrication during much of the rebuild process, which could easily contribute to misfires, rough running, and long-term wear. Other systems required servicing too, including the front Haldex unit and several filters throughout the car. One major challenge was sourcing replacement parts. Bugatti reportedly refuses to supply many individual components outside authorized dealerships. That forced Matt and his team to cross-reference parts through third-party suppliers and Volkswagen Group catalogs. Gaskets, Pumps, spark plugs, filters, and ignition parts often had to be sourced independently. The process highlighted how difficult independent Bugatti ownership can become. Even skilled mechanics struggle to access technical information and genuine parts without factory support. Despite all the progress, the core problem still remained unresolved. The gearbox pump issue had no confirmed cause, and the engine misfire still had not been permanently fixed. The Veyron was driving again, but everyone knew the deeper mystery inside the electrical system still remained. What makes this Bugatti rebuild so fascinating is not just the car itself, but a constant feeling that disaster could happen at any moment. Every time Matt solves one issue, another hidden fault appears somewhere else. That unpredictable cycle keeps viewers emotionally invested because nobody knows whether the Veyron will finally become reliable or suffer another major breakdown. The project also reveals an important truth about ultra-expensive hypercars. Owning $1 million car does not guarantee reliability or perfection. In many ways, highly advanced vehicles become harder to maintain as they age because their systems are incredibly complex and expensive to repair. The Bugatti Veyron was designed to break world records and push engineering limits, but that same complexity creates huge problems once parts begin wearing out. Heat, pressure, electronics, and hydraulic systems all interact together inside the car. When one component fails, it can easily create problems somewhere else. Matt's rebuild has shown just how fragile these systems can become without regular servicing. It has also demonstrated how much determination and problem-solving skill are required to keep a hypercar alive outside official dealerships. Many people watching the series expected the Veyron to be nearly indestructible because of its price and reputation. Instead, they discover a machine that behaves more like a highly stressed racing car, requiring constant attention. The emotional appeal of the project comes from watching someone refuse to give up despite endless setbacks. Matt repeatedly faces moments where the easiest option will be walking away from the car completely. Yet every new failure only pushes the investigation deeper. That determination is a major reason why the rebuild has captured so much attention online. Viewers are not only watching a car get repaired, they are watching a mystery slowly unfold piece by piece. Somewhere inside the Veyron, an electrical or control system fault is still hiding. The gearbox pump problem has not been fully solved. The misfire issue could easily return under load, and once the car is driven harder at higher speeds, even more hidden weaknesses could appear. For now, the Bugatti Veyron is alive again. It drives, shifts gears, and produces incredible power that made it famous around the world. But beneath that success remains a constant sense of danger. At any moment, the next hidden failure could surface and push the rebuild into chaos all over again. Even with all the problems, one thing became very clear throughout the rebuild. Matt Armstrong was no longer simply repairing a broken hypercar. He was exposing the hidden reality of owning one of the most complicated cars ever created. Every bolt removed from a Veyron uncovered another reminder that these machines are engineering masterpieces, but also maintenance nightmares once they become older and neglected. The project changed how many viewers looked at expensive supercars and hypercars. Most people imagine million-pound vehicles as perfect machines built with unlimited quality and reliability. But the Bugatti showed the opposite side of that world. It showed how heat, pressure, electronics, and time slowly wear down even the most advanced engineering. It also showed how difficult independent repairs can become when manufacturers tightly control parts and servicing information. Some viewers were shocked to learn that ordinary Volkswagen Group components could be found inside such an expensive car. Others were amazed by how much labor was required for even simple maintenance jobs. But the biggest surprise of all was watching the Veyron repeatedly fight against being repaired. Every success seemed temporary. Every fix uncovered another mystery. The gearbox pressure problem still remained unresolved. The engine misfire could still return without warning. And nobody truly knew how the car would behave once driven aggressively at higher speeds. That uncertainty is exactly what made the series so addictive to watch. People were no longer watching only for the car itself. They were watching to see whether Matt could finally beat the endless chain of hidden faults. The first drive proved the Veyron could move again, but it also proved the rebuild was far from finished. Somewhere inside the car, something was still wrong. And once the Bugatti returns to full power under real road conditions, every hidden weakness inside its complicated systems could return all at once. For Matt Armstrong, the rebuild had become more than just a project. It had turned into a battle against one of the most difficult and unpredictable hypercars ever made. What made the entire situation even more intense was a growing fear that some of the damage inside the Bugatti might not fully appear until the car was pushed harder. Up to this point, most of the testing had happened at lower speeds around the workshop and nearby roads. But the Bugatti Veyron was never designed to move slowly. This is a machine originally built to break speed records and produce over 1,000 horsepower without effort. A car operating at that level creates enormous heat, pressure, and stress inside every system. That meant hidden weaknesses could remain invisible during gentle driving and only appear once the engine, gearbox, and hydraulic systems were placed under full load. Matt understood this better than anyone. Even though the car was technically driving again, there was still no confidence that it was truly healthy. The gearbox pump issue alone was dangerous enough to create major concern. If the pump became stuck on again during high-speed driving, temperatures could rise extremely quickly, damaging wiring, destroying the pump itself, or potentially affecting the gearbox system in much more serious ways. The uncertainty surrounding the electrical faults made the situation even more worrying, because electrical problems are often the hardest issues to diagnose properly. Unlike a broken mechanical component, electrical faults can appear randomly and disappear just as quickly. One moment the car behaves perfectly, and the next moment warning lights explode across the dashboard without explanation. That unpredictable behavior slowly turned the rebuild into a psychological challenge, as much as a mechanical one. Every successful repair gave hope, but every new fault immediately destroyed confidence again. The emotional pressure on the team became obvious as the project continued. Hours of work could suddenly feel pointless the moment another hidden issue appeared. Yet despite all of that frustration, the rebuild also created some of the most satisfying moments viewers had seen on Matt Armstrong's channel. Watching the dead Bugatti slowly come back to life piece by piece made every small victory feel important. Hearing the W16 engine run smoothly after hours of diagnosis felt rewarding. Seeing the car finally select gears and move under its own power felt almost unbelievable considering the condition arrived in. That emotional contrast between progress and disaster became the heart of the entire story. The Bugatti was constantly balancing between success and failure, and that balance kept viewers completely invested because nobody knew which direction the project would go next. Even the experts involved in the rebuild admitted that many of the problems were unusual and difficult to explain. The cooked gearbox wiring, temperature-sensitive misfires, contaminated fluids, and inconsistent pressure faults suggested the Veyron may have suffered years of neglect before arriving at the workshop. Some damage may even have been caused by previous failed repair attempts or poor servicing decisions made long before Matt owned the car. That possibility added another layer of mystery to the project because the team was not only repairing faults, they were also uncovering the hidden history of what this Bugatti had experienced over the years. Every damaged component told part of the story. Burnt wiring revealed overheating problems. Dirty oil revealed poor maintenance. Leaking coolant revealed how vulnerable the low-mounted radiators were to road damage. Slowly, the car itself began exposing the truth about its past. And as the rebuild moved closer toward full road testing, one question continued hanging over everything. Would the Bugatti finally become reliable again, or was the next catastrophic failure already waiting to happen somewhere deep inside the car?